So in this video, I'm gonna break down an elk hind quarter the way I do it. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. But the cool part about this, in the second half of the video, we're gonna have a Chef Jamie Teagan, come in and explain the different things that you can do with various cuts. I've done the same thing for a long time, occasionally switch it up, but it'll be cool to have a new perspective about what you can do with the various muscle groups of an elk. What I generally do when I break these down is just bone it out into separate muscle groups, and oftentimes I'll freeze a bigger chunk of muscle at a time, and then I can decide what I want to do with that later, whether it's break it down into steaks, chunks, strips, roasts, whatever, grind it, but I start big and then kind of work small. So to start off, I'm gonna bone this thing out. I try to pick off most of the hair, but I'm not perfect, so I always start by just like picking off any of the hair that I missed. Just, you know, cleaner the better. So for a hind quarter, definitely start on the inside, or at least I do anyway. This one still has the evidence of sex attached to it because that's a legal requirement in the state I was hunting. So we can take that off now that we are home. So we don't need that anymore. All right, and sometimes if you've been hanging an animal for a while, you might have more of a crust on the outside. This one's been in a cooler for 5 days or so, so it's not too much of a crust on the outside, so I'm not actually going to trim much right now. Sometimes if you have a thick layer, it helps to trim that off. Like this little chunk I might trim off, but other than that, probably just leave most of this on for the time being. So here's the hip socket. I like to start around there and then basically think of where the bones go through the leg and just follow that through, and you're just filleting the meat out. I do the same way if I have to bone something out in the field. When I have it here, I take a little more time to try to do a little more precise, just keeping the muscle groups nice and separate and not trying to gash things up too much though. Got the leg completely boned out. Occasionally I like to go through, if I missed some meat, just like little chunks like this, just grab those off and throw them in the grind pile. Also, if you're gonna make bone stock, which a lot of people like to do, it's not the end of the world to leave a little more meat on there just to add a little flavor in the stock. So set that aside. So now, like if I was in the field, sometimes you can just, this is how I would pack it out, just leave it in one big chunk. But because we're at home and we're dealing with it, I'm gonna separate it out. So got the lower shank here, separate that out. And honestly, I'm pretty much done with that piece. I don't usually trim these because I like to braise them. Some people also leave it on the bone and bandsaw it and make ossobuco, but I just usually bone it out and do the same thing, just without the bone. See, I'm not positive on all the nomenclature on some of this stuff. So it'll be cool to see, hear Jamie kind of hopefully identify some of these things for us. I believe this is the sirloin. I'm just taking off this outer film so I can separate these muscles out a little better. I'll probably leave that in a whole chunk unless Jamie tells me otherwise, but a lot of times I just leave this because I can take it out, cook it as a whole roast. I can steak it, I can separate it out into, there's like 3 main muscle groups inside of this, and then you can make chunk meat, you can make jerky, you can make anything out of this one. It's pretty versatile. It's not the most tender, but it's like tender enough that it lends it, like you can roast it and it's pretty good. I think some people call this, it might be the tri-tip. See, this is where I don't know. You can steak it, you can do jerky with it. It's just like a nice chunk to slice, but it's like the grain of the meat is like diagonal to the length of it, I guess. So it's a little wonky, but again, curious to see what Jamie says about that. Anyway, so this is all broke down into the respective muscles. This is kind of where I start my process of deciding what I want to do with them, but it'll be cool to get another perspective and see what, get another opinion on what we can do with all these different cuts. So we'll get Jamie in here and hopefully she can identify some of the things and give us some ideas for recipes. And now we have the actual experts to come and help tell me what we can do with this in terms of cuts and recipes and cool stuff. So we have Chef Jamie.
Hi.
And my wife, Kara. Yeah. So anyway, hindquarter, there's a lot of good meat in the hindquarter.
A lot of good meat.
I feel
and
like
so much of it.
So much.
Yeah. I mean, these meats is where you get a lot of your steaks. I mean, and you can, I mean, some of them are going to be a little bit more tough than others, but like, especially this bottom round, this has huge, like fibers going through the whole thing. So this is one that you really have to like, cut against the grain, so it's not going to be so chewy. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of the meats, the fibers are so much smaller compared to this. You'll see that in a flank steak as well. Mm-hmm. And so you want to cut those much smaller.
That's definitely my favorite steak out of an animal, besides backstrap, obviously. We used to cook those as roasts. I feel like it dries out. There's not a ton of intermuscular fat. There's not a ton of connective tissue on it at all. And so that's just straight steaks.
Yeah.
That is
I completely agree.
perfect steaks.
Yep.
Good to
Tender
know.
enough, like really, really good.
Yeah.
Not a ton of flavor because it's not like super tender, but like that, the quintessential elk steak comes out of that.
It's great. We do the same thing.
So what about the top round? It's like a diagonal grain kind of almost through
Yeah,
that.
so you guys know, like, so a tri-tip has multiple grains in it. Mm-hmm. And so when you cut a tri-tip, and we'll get to that in a second, but you kind of have to like watch where you're, slicing for a tri-tip. This is the same because there's so many ways that the meat goes. We like this one and a couple of the top rounds, we like doing like carne asada. And pre-slicing it ahead of time, and portioning it out. And these are just like, or some jerky too. Mm-hmm. This is a great one to use for that too. You can get some really nice long strips with it. You guys like fajitas and stuff.
We do fajitas.
Yeah. But yeah, this one, I mean, definitely has like some things going on throughout the whole thing.
You got kind of that weird tendon that like chunks this part out a little bit, but this whole roast in there, because it is such a long fiber structure, we can cut those into steaks if we want to, and it's a little bit tougher, but still a really flavorful steak.
Yeah, huge chunk of meat though. Like you get so much out of it.
Very large.
Very large.
Very large.
Probably one of the biggest like continual grain chunks of meat. I don't know.
And you've done a really great job on this quarter and on the shoulder that you broke down of actually keeping all of the muscles intact. The better you can maintain muscles in their whole structure as you're breaking it out, then you can figure out how to process it even further into consumable pieces.
Oh yeah.
But if you just start hacking away, it's going to make everything so much more challenging.
That's when everything ends up in the burger pile.
That's when everything ends in burger, and it starts in field processing.
Oh, for sure.
And so if you just start whacking it away, then once it hits your table, whether you're doing it in the kitchen or the garage or wherever, like the less cuts you have in things, or the more maintained that you've kept chunks, if you've deboned it in the field and you're packing it out or whatever, like maintaining all those muscles together is really, really helpful for later down the road.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Have you guys heard of people keeping silver skin on like cuts of meat and then they freeze it
Yeah, we'll keep it on.
Yeah.
It depends on how much time we have for processing.
Sure.
Let's say we have a bunch of animals and there's like a lot more hunting to do, and
I just left Kara with a whole elk to process by herself, which
Yeah,
may or may not have happened.
Yeah.
might have to go
nice.
to work, and then you have other obligations. We'll leave silver skin on, and so maybe we're freezing the whole like steaks for strips roast.
Sure.
And then later when we pull it out to thaw, then we'll break it down further. But I feel like it's almost a barrier to freezer burn.
We're also a family that does like things in kind of small batches.
Okay,
So like
yeah.
if we do have like a grind pile or something, and we, want to try a different recipe for, like sausage or whatever, we'll take only a small amount of meat out because we've been there where we've ruined an entire animal like making sausage.
Yeah.
Like beginning of my hunting days, because you just don't really know until you actually like go through the process of like, oh, I like to try this. That didn't work.
Yeah.
Kind of the science behind it. So we do like small batch type stuff, and it works out pretty good because then you get to experiment with, different flavors on, cuts of meat that you might just throw in a grind pile.
Sweet. What about eye of the round?
Eye of the round, another steak. I mean, we just do that in the steaks too. I did a really good carpaccio with this with the antelope once.
Oh.
Trim it up, wrap it in some plastic wrap, saran wrap, put it in the freezer for like 2 hours, and then slice it really thin. It is so good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just like in a raw way to eat it, literally. I mean,
yeah.
it's just like really flavorful too. So that's something I like to do with that.
Yeah. That muscle there, we like to call that one the chick snugs or the chicken nugget of the elk. It's the lightest colored muscle within the whole elk. So there's not a lot of myoglobin. We'll like cut it into pieces that are smaller, and then we'll bread and fry or bread and putting in the oven. Goes super well with honey mustard.
Oh.
So
Okay.
chicken nuggets
When you
and
fry
honey
it or
mustard
make
awesome.
it breaded red meat with it. Yeah.
That is
Definitely
like
goes
the
well.
best cut to pair with honey
That's
mustard.
great.
And it's different. And so we'll do that. Or like you're saying, if it's still like partially frozen, cutting it super thin, and then again turning it into like Mongolian meat and putting it onto like a flat top and making a noodle bowl out of it. Or like Philly cheesesteaks or like a like meat, like shaved meat sandwich or something. Great with that one too.
What about sirloin tip? Right? That's what I think
big
people
guy.
call this.
That thing has a lot of stuff going on. I mean, that's a gigantic roast.
Yeah. Well, and there's like 3 main chunks that you can kind of see, but and we have like just roasted this, or like slow cooked it on a smoker.
The barbecue roast.
The barbecue roast.
Or the party roast.
We've slow cooked it on the grill, like indirect heat on the grill, and it turns out pretty good. It has like the interconnected tissue, so it's like chew around it a little bit, but it's pretty good. At least that's what we've done with it a decent
If
amount.
you smoke it in a grill or wherever, you can like stab some holes and shove some garlic cloves into that, and then season the whole outside, smoke it, and then slice it.
But yeah, we do roast. I mean, we chunk it up again, like we'll slice it for like tacos or whatever. Great roast. I mean, you could essentially do this in like the 3 parts, like you said. And that'll all break down. I mean, there's some like nice fat in there.
Isn't this what we fed everybody at our wedding?
We did like 8 of these for our wedding.
I think we shot 3 elk that year.
that's
Kara shot
awesome.
2 elk. She had a cow tag.
That's
And I
so
think
great.
we did like a deer or something. I did as many barbecue roasts as we had for the actual wedding night, and then all the steaks were strips roasts. We had a steak strips, so there was like was smoked roast, there was steaks for strips, and then the night before we made burgers with ground and steaks, I think.
We consumed a lot of meat in that weekend.
Man, you spoiled your guests.
This is just like a flap thing that kind of goes over that. So I think that's a grind for the most part.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great chunks.
You can make chunks out
Yeah,
of it.
could
no, I
totally
turned that
do
into
chunks,
I
yeah.
turned
Yeah.
that into chunk meat for
Heck yeah.
stir fries and stuff because it's
Can.
just so square.
Yeah.
You just cut that into chunks.
And then one that I think I just don't pay attention to, and I probably have
That
missed
is
out
my
a ton.
favorite.
I feel like this is the tri-tip, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, which have totally overlooked often, and like a lot of times I just like chunk it up, or ends up like, I feel even when you like cut it off the animal, sometimes you accidentally like slice into it and mess it up.
It is my favorite.
Really?
Yeah. Only because, and like I said before, like the grains on this run like in many different ways.
Different directions.
On a beef, it looks very different. It's much larger and kind of looks like a T, sort of. But this is one of my favorites because when you like marinate this for like 2 or 3 days, and then you throw it on the grill on high heat, you get these yummy ends that are just like crispy and yummy. They're like absolutely my favorite.
Burnt ends.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so good because like there's just so much flavor, and you know, like with wild game, you're not going to get a lot of that fat. But like in beef, you have like a significant fat cap on a tri-tip. So if you ever have a tri-tip like out in the field and you see some fat on it, I would literally keep it. Any fat, but
it's gotta be a chunky
it's one
elk.
of my favorite. Yeah, really chunky elk, like in the thick of winter. But anyway, I mean, because it's kind of hidden underneath everything, you're probably not gonna like really get any fat on there. But it's one of my favorites.
Cool.
So. And just as like a steak, like a full-on steak, I don't. I slice it up after I grill it, just really thin pieces, and just eat it as it is. It's great.
I don't know what these are like somewhere on the top. I don't even really remember how we pieced these together, but they're significant chunks of meat. I don't know what they're called. Sirloin butt or something. There was like a sirloin butt.
That one. Anyway, these are great. Again, these are great roasts as whole. You don't necessarily have to break these down much except for like maybe trimming it up a little bit on the edges. But these will break down. These are also great for one roast, braising, all of that good stuff. One thing I forgot to mention on a couple of these is like doing curries, you know, throwing in pieces of meat and curries. So just break down all that flavor. It's so good. Yeah. Sit in those flavors.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of this, a lot of times we end up chunking those up and then like labeling it like stew meat.
Yeah.
Or like essentially just like cube it up, and then it's just like, it's not necessarily the best for like a quick sear, but if it's something that's going to cook for a while and break down a little more, that's like pretty good. This is like, well, we can move on to like the shank, which you got on the hindquarter, you got the like main chunk of the shank, and then there's like the upper shank.
Yeah. The upper shank.
I don't know what you call it, but
yeah, and like we discussed before, I mean, your mind immediately goes to ossobuco. I mean, ossobuco comes with such a great sauce; it's hard to, you know, not ruin that. So
this upper one does like separate out, which I've done a few times. There's like, I forget, is there like 4 main groups in there where it doesn't have quite as much like intermuscular stuff.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4.
And so that one I will occasionally break down.
Well, this one's a great one for just slow cooking for pulled meat, for pulled meat sandwiches or pulled barbecue sandwiches or something.
There's a lot of meat there.
That's several pounds of meat right there. But the tendon being so big that you cook that down, and then you're pulling out giant chunks as one giant flap. Yeah. Whereas if we're canning it, then you're obviously cutting that into pieces, and it kind of breaks down to an extent. But if you do pulled meat as a kind of a shank roast, then it's just super easy. You just pull that whole tendon out, and you're like,
yummy.
And it's like super rewarding too.
Satisfying to watch it just fall apart.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Do you guys do your own stocks?
No, rarely. I've done turkey stock. I don't think I've ever actually done a like elk or deer leg stock, which is sad because obviously you can make some tasty stuff with it.
With us starting like the whole kind of canning process of meat, like we typically don't do our own stocks either, but with doing that method, I really want to try and get more into it. Because, I mean, typically you have all the ingredients anyway in your house, you know, with how much we cook. So, you know, pretty basic ingredients, and throwing some bones in and just getting all that nutrients and flavor from them. I mean, that's like something else. So
do you like saw them up and
just
then
in chunks,
into
and
chunks
just leave
and then
them in there. Yeah, obviously clean it up, but toss them in and
that's something I need to try at some point for sure. Yeah. A lot of times I feel like I would be hesitant to, you know, do too many like specialty sausages or jerky or whatever. I'm like, oh, I don't want to lose out on all my steaks and stuff. So this having like diversity in meat's fun.
Well, and two, it's like something that I tell a lot of people that like are either just getting into wild game cooking or just cooking in general. Like rule of thumb, don't be afraid to try things.
Oh,
I mean, if it's salt and pepper that you're using, then use the heck out of it, but make it good. Like use a thermometer, like, you know, make sure your meat's to temp, like the right temp, and it's going to be great, you know? So if that's all that you can do, then that's all you can do, but try other things. Don't make it complicated. Like with my recipes, I want you to be able to like do them at your house, you know, like I want you to feel like you're a master chef in your kitchen, you know, like the recipes are simple, they're not complicated. We can all do it, so.
Sweet.
With your help, yeah.
Well, but yeah, but try it out, experiment, so.
Well, thanks a bunch.
Thank you.